Happy New Year and welcome to Yahoo Sports Daily. She's Caroline Fenton. I am Jason Fitz. Oh my God, what a wild couple of days we've had for college football fanatics everywhere, and we will get into a ton of it over the course of the next couple hours. Spencer McLaughlin, Lockdown Ducks, going to join us later. We will talk to Oregon, talk all things Oregon with them. We're going to get to Ole Miss and their wild upset in about 15 minutes, but your Final Four is set as we sit right now. Your Final Four in college football is Indiana, Oregon, Ole Miss, and Miami. So raise your hand if you thought that was going to be the Final Four so that we all know who the liars in the room are. Nobody saw this coming. There is one thing, Caroline, that we can say, though, clearly to me. We keep saying, oh, my God, unprecedented. Never seen anything like this. This is wild. This is just such chaos. The number one team in the country went out and looked like the number one team in the country. For all the chaos we have, I just want everybody to take a second, take a deep breath, and acknowledge that Indiana beating the snot out of Alabama 38-3 is a reminder that Indiana is the best team in the entire nation right now.
That was the only thing that made sense from this past weekend. And Happy New Year to everybody. Hope everyone enjoyed the games as much as I did, sitting on my couch all day long, not doing anything, and it was lovely. But when you think about it, you know, the teams that win their conference championships and get a first round bye, those are the teams that should be advancing to the college football playoff semifinal and should be considered national championship contenders. Indiana, in the entire existence of 2 years of a 12-team playoff, is the only team that got the bye and advanced to the semifinals. That's the only team. So Indiana, in this entire race, in this entire field, even going back to the 2024 season, is the only team that actually, on paper, when you look at the stats, when you look at the rankings, when you look at the seeding, Indiana's the only one that makes sense. So I know that looking at these brands, it's very weird, right? That we had a matchup between the number one team in the country, conference champion, undefeated, versus a team that lost in its conference championship and kind of probably didn't really, like, there was enough people that could make an argument that they didn't really belong there. That when one of those teams was Alabama and one of those teams was Indiana, we have to just erase everything that we thought that we knew about college football. Is Indiana in a league of their own? No. If you watched Oregon and what they did to one of the best offenses in college football and Texas Tech and blanking them yesterday, then you understand that Oregon is also in that elite upper echelon. That I think there's other, elite teams that we have in this field. But right now, Fitz, it feels so much more wide open than I ever could have expected.
This is the biggest brand turnaround we've ever seen in sports. And I'm not being hyperbolic. I mean, this is an end statement here. Curt Cignetti's turnaround at Indiana is unprecedented. And the reason many people don't realize it is because most of you weren't paying attention to Indiana. Why? Because before Curt Cignetti got there, they had more losses than any team in college football history. We are talking about whatever your favorite sport is now. Ask yourself, who's the worst team in the history of this sport? What has happened here is Curt Cignetti overnight has taken that team from being absolutely just god-awful. He's turned the franchise into now a program that has a college football appearance and now a college football win over one of the biggest brands in the sport. If this ends in a national championship, this will be the most significant brand turnaround we've ever seen. And that's, at some point, that's why it's so hard for everybody to wrap their heads around. This is the equivalent of waking up tomorrow and suddenly the laughingstock is the best in all the land. This smacks every single school that says, well, it takes time. If you're a North Carolina Belichick fan and you're saying, hey, it takes a second. We got a lot of new players here. It takes a minute to get your culture. Curt Cignetti would like to have a word. If you're Alabama and you're turning around and saying, well, we've got a new coach here replacing a legend, it's going to take a second to establish who we are. Curt Cignetti would like a word. At some point, what we all have to acknowledge is that Indiana is doing this with less 5 stars than anybody. They're doing this with less recruiting than a lot of people. They are not one of the top 10 paid for teams in all of college football right now. Yes, they've invested in the program. But the fact is, Curt Cignetti is a miracle worker, and he has changed the entire culture of one of the worst teams in all of sports that is now dominating the season they're in. I don't think we can give this enough praise, Caroline.
Indiana is who Alabama wants to be. Let that sink in for a second. Indiana is now the standard of college football. Indiana is who Notre Dame wants to be. Indiana is who Georgia wants to be. And if you don't believe me, just listen to Fernando Mendoza's post-game press conference or post-game interview. He talked about how the Heisman was an award for all 22 players. Fernando Mendoza constantly gives credit to his teammates and to his coaching staff. We heard friend of the show, friend of the program, D'Angelo Pons after the Rose Bowl, giving credit to everybody else but himself. This is an unselfish program. This is a program where no one person is bigger than the team. This is a program that doesn't shoot itself in the foot. This is a team that doesn't make the silly mistakes. This is a team that just constantly and consistently goes out there and executes at an incredibly high level. That no one, not a single team in America, has built up the resume that Indiana has. Indiana went on the road and beat Oregon in the regular season. They beat the reigning national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, and they didn't just beat Alabama. They didn't just skate past Alabama. They shellacked Alabama. Show me a team in college football that has done what Indiana has done and has beaten who Indiana has beaten in the process while still not having any single smudge on their resume. We talk a lot about, I've said it so many times before, talking about the Alabama program, really just college football as a whole, is Nick Saban's not here anymore. Nick Saban's not going to be here to come save you. And there is an Alabama side of this game as well. But the closest thing that I think that we have that exists to Nick Saban, the closest thing to Nick Saban that exists in college football right now, I think is Curt Cignetti. Curt Cignetti has broken this Alabama fan base and has broken everything that we thought we knew about this sport.
2025 recruiting rankings, 0 5-stars, 1 4-star, 22 3-stars. All right, the 49th ranked class. And Curt Cignetti, that man right there with that swagger, just walked in and did that to Alabama. And I want to say this as we move to the Alabama side of this, Caroline. This does not mean Alabama is broken. It doesn't mean everything's wrong with Alabama. That's what most people are going to do today. And we're about to talk about the Alabama side. But one more time before we do it, I just want to make sure, Tide fans, you listen to this. This is nothing to do with Alabama. This has everything to do with the fact that Indiana is flat out better than everybody right now. They are undefeated. They have a shot at being the first ever 16-0 team in college football. Like, put this into context, put respect on their name. Bama, obviously, they're reeling. You look at social media, and we're right back to where we always are. Fire DeBoer. I saw all of it on Twitter X last night of fire DeBoer. I don't even care if we don't have a coach this year. This guy isn't it. I understand the harsh reactions here. This is just a tough pill to swallow because Alabama wasn't even competitive. The 3 points almost felt like a mercy gift at this. This game felt like it could have been 50-0, Caroline.
It really did just feel like they kicked that field goal just to not get shut out. And, you can love that. You can hate that. You can be indifferent about that. I've seen so many Alabama fans say, I don't even care if we regress. Get rid of Kalen DeBoer. Just listen to yourself. That is idiotic. You don't care that you get worse. You just want that guy out of the building, even though he just led you to a college football playoff quarterfinal. Like, please, get real. Does it hurt? 100%. Does it suck to get embarrassed the way that they got embarrassed in the Rose Bowl? Absolutely 100% it does. But I don't think you could expect Kalen DeBoer to be the guy that follows the ultimate guy in college football and all of a sudden have this program turned around and winning a national championship in year 2. Look at Georgia. I think Kirby Smart is one of the best, if not the best coaches in America. And Georgia will be watching the next round of the playoffs from their couches. Ryan Day had one of the best rosters in America. Joey McGuire at Texas Tech had one of the best offenses and one of the best defenses in America. It was one of the most complete teams in America. All of those teams are eliminated. That's just the reality of college football right now. A Saban-esque dynastic run that he had at Alabama kind of feels like those are extinct at this point. The field is too difficult. The path to a national championship is too hard. And roster construction has never been more difficult, or there haven't been more, landmines to navigate than there are right now. Do Alabama fans have every right to be embarrassed and disappointed? 1,000% yes. But that's not an indictment, I don't believe, on Kalen DeBoer. Talk to me next year or the year after that, or the year after that if Alabama is consistently going 7-5 and not even sniffing a college football playoff. But as long as you are in the dance, I can't be on board with fire this guy. He's not good enough. He's just not Nick Saban.
Well, and now you mentioned Ryan Day. Let's get there. Ohio State, they were upset, stunning. The largest upset so far that we've had, combined with the margin of victory in a college football playoff game so far. Miami takes down Ohio State 24-14. And this Carolina, I'm going to make an NFL comp for me. Let me see if you buy into this. There was a year, we all remember, not that long ago, where the New England Patriots were an undefeated football team. And as they were going into the postseason, they had the chance to be the best ever. And there was this plucky Giants team. This Giants team that was somehow a wild card team that nobody really took seriously. They have a bunch of history. Everybody loved the Giants franchise fine. But that team, not great expectations until they go on a wild card run that gets them to the Super Bowl where they do the impossible and beat the undefeated. I feel like that's Miami in this situation in this year's playoff, because a month ago it was Miami doesn't belong. A month ago it was Miami shouldn't be here. A month ago it was the ACC sucks. They don't even deserve a plate at the table. All of this is trash. And now we sit here, 2 wins because they didn't get a first round bye. 2 wins, 2 convincing wins, 2 dominant wins, 2 straight wins where their defense comes out and gives them a chance in a game that they never should have had in the minds of most of us. Miami is out here just slapping all the doubters down, and they are doing it with absolute force. This is an epic win for Miami.
1,000% an epic win by Miami that I didn't even think was possible. And I'll tell on myself here. I didn't even think it was possible for Miami to go in to Texas A&M and beat Texas A&M at Kyle Field, but they did. So I think what I've learned about Miami is that the College Football Playoff Committee got it right. As much as Notre Dame fans want to whine about being on the outside looking in, if you punch your ticket to the semifinal, you have proven that you belong there. I think Miami can win a national championship. Why not? I can't buy in, though, to the fact that Miami is just this cutesy, plucky, precious little story. Miami had the 5th highest spending of any other program in America in NIL. Miami has a 5th-year quarterback that's played in some of the biggest games that the sport has to offer in Carson Beck. Miami has one of the best defensive players in America in Ruben Bain. Miami has one of the best young receivers in America in Malachi Toney. Miami, and I understand that this Miami team is not the Miami team of the early 2000s or the 80s or the U. That's still the brand that exists, but Miami has been a far cry from that for a very long time. But I don't want to act like Miami is just this cutesy, plucky little story, because they've invested so much money into this team in order to be exactly where they are. That doesn't make it any less impressive. That doesn't mean that Miami doesn't deserve a whole lot of praise for what they've done in order to get here, because a lot of people didn't even want them in the dance to begin with. But they're not a Cinderella. If anybody is a Cinderella in this dance, it's Ole Miss, Fitz.
Well, it's hard for me because everything you just said is so spot on. And I don't know what the right term is for the team that nobody really expected to be. Like, when the season started, everybody expected Miami to be this, right? So you're right. Mm-hmm. But halfway through the season, we all thought Miami was going to be left out of this thing. And a month ago today, most people would not have predicted a month ago right now that Miami was even going to make it to the college football playoff because of the way that the committee had been telling us they viewed Miami versus Notre Dame. So that's why it feels Cinderella-like to me. But you're right. It's hard when you've spent that much money to really be a Cinderella. It's hard when you have Carson Beck to be a Cinderella. I don't know what the right term is for the team that everybody wanted left out, but I do think that this is an incredibly important moment for college football. Because if all the playoff ever does is give us a bunch of blowouts and the teams that barely make the playoffs don't make any noise and all we get is the number 1 team going out and going on a run, then all of this feels redundant. It feels blasé. It doesn't have drama. If you are somebody that sits there and says you don't want expansion of college football and you like it the way it is, Miami is dashing your dreams in front of you, because this is a team that could have been left out. I believed this run by Miami is going to be a catalyst for why the entire college football landscape looks at it and justifies expansion to 16 teams right away. I believe that this run is going to be why everybody looks at, and the struggle of teams that have had the bye is going to be why everybody looks at it this year and say, hey, We don't want to have a bye. We're going to get rid of byes. All of this speaks to college football playoff expansion. But most importantly, I mentioned that Giants run in the beginning because it's often praised as one of the best things we've seen in recent Super Bowl memory for the NFL. An improbable run to a championship becomes the sort of story that is told over and over and over again. Improbable runs to championships get 30 for 30s. They get documentaries. They get movies made about them. If Miami can run this thing through to a championship, this is not the best Miami team, but this would become the best Miami championship story because it would be a first. A team barely making the college football playoff, a team left for dead, a team that the old system never would have found a way for, coming in making this much noise in the playoffs is absolutely huge. We got plenty to break down in the course of this. We are just getting started with the college football reactions from a huge day. We'll get to the fallouts from, the wild ending last night. Oh, my God. Just when you thought things would get normal, maybe Georgia would do it. Nope. Ole Miss stunner. Lane getting paid. We'll tell you all about it next. Revenge is sweet. Ole Miss avenges their October loss to Georgia to take the Sugar Bowl 39-34, book a spot in the CFP semis. Yes, due to the contract that he got at LSU. Lane Kiffin, by the way, made $500,000 last night. Ole Miss goes in and wins 39-34 in a game, Caroline, that at the start of the fourth quarter, they were down 24-19. Midway through the fourth quarter, they were up by 10. Georgia gets the big comeback, and then we get a field goal with 6 seconds left that really seals the game. This was as wild a game, and that man right there, Chambliss, deserves so much credit for playing video game football. Ole Miss offense was just absolutely dynamic. It was incredible to watch.
Yeah, and don't forget the last second safety, and then Georgia got to run a play, and Pete Golding's on the sidelines covered in Gatorade. Like, what do you mean Georgia gets to run a play? It was so perfectly and beautifully chaotic. And Fitz, I will admit that I woke up yesterday morning on New Year's Day and thought, I am kind of bummed that the 8 p.m. game is Georgia Ole Miss because it's going to be over by halftime. Georgia's going to roll Ole Miss. We're probably going to see backups come in. Like, I've seen this story before. I don't need to see it again. I hate that our day is going to end on that. Prove me wrong. And I think that kind of shows me that I should not have any sort of, big and sweeping judgments about the college football playoff because truly anything can happen. But I do wonder, Fitz, and I've been kind of going back and forth with this all morning long as I'm reflecting on just an all-timer that we got last night. Do you think Lane Kiffin is happy this morning? Sure, he's $500,000 richer, sure, it's his former team and the team that he constructed and the team that he led for the last 5 years is heading to the college football playoff semifinal. But do you think that he watched that game last night and really, truly wanted Ole Miss to win?
No, I mean, look, at the end of the day, most people have a little bit of competitive nature. How many people are actually happy for their ex when their ex goes out and thrives, right? Like I've had the opportunity in music. I've had the opportunity to leave some projects over the course of the years. And like, I'm not going to lie, if you leave something and then you see they turn around and have a number one song afterwards, you're like, you're great, good for you. Like, I don't know. I've never thought of your question, but you're 1,000% right. I can't imagine that there's a part of Lane Kiffin. Yes, I mean, he's going to be happy for those players, and I'm sure he's happy for the coaches and all of those right things that you have to say. But certainly you start to feel like if you're Ole Miss, man, if they're just moving on without you, boy, they look really smart in this entire situation. And by the way, in fairness, Caroline, like to be transparent, even in our group text when we were watching the game, at the end of the first half, I was wondering if Ole Miss missed Lane Kiffin, right? Like they were down 21-12 at the end of the first half. It was disjointed play calling. There was a bad sequence with clock management and a field goal attempt that they couldn't get off at the end of the first half. There were some drop passes. The team looked disjointed. When's the last time we saw that sort of a second half come out and just whoop somebody's ass sort of momentum out of an Ole Miss team that needed a kick in the butt? Like I feel like Ole Miss came out and gave us the second half of the gods, which speaks to whatever happened at halftime from the coaching staff they had that doesn't include Lane Kiffin.
It speaks to coaching. And to that, you say, how often do we see somebody come out in the second half and whoop somebody's ass like that? Not just somebody, Georgia. Kirby Smart and Georgia. How many times do you feel like Kirby Smart gets outsmarted, no pun intended, or outcoached? Because when Kirby Smart decided to go for it on 4th and 9, down 3, and nobody really seemed to know that the ball was being snapped, including their left tackle and including Gunnar Stockton, I had to wonder and step back and think, did Kirby Smart just hurt his football team? Did Kirby Smart just cost his team a trip to the Final Four by going for it there in that moment? Look, we can play armchair head coach and armchair play caller all day long, but in that moment, I thought Kirby Smart just cost his football team. Just the way that I felt about Pete Golding and trying to get that field goal off before half, couldn't get it off before half. That was bad tactical management. But overall, this was not a game that was, void of mistakes on either sideline. I just never would have expected that it was Ole Miss that would have been the team that made fewer mistakes than a Georgia team that just doesn't make mistakes, and a Georgia coaching staff that is so incredibly sound, especially in the biggest games in college football that the sport has to offer. But I kind of step back and think Pete Golding in his second game as a head coach has done more and achieved more than Lane Kiffin ever did at Ole Miss, has done more and achieved more than Kalen DeBoer has at Alabama, has done more, achieved more, and won more than Brian Kelly did at LSU. So I think we kind of have to step back and look at and think, maybe Lane Kiffin left Ole Miss because he didn't actually believe that this team had what it took to go on a run and win a national championship. And when you beat Georgia the way that they did last night, I have to think that Lane Kiffin was wrong.
Well, and look, I was wrong when it comes to the coaching standpoint. How often have we talked about I love proof of concept, right? So you walk into this knowing that there are 3 coaches in college football that have won a national championship, Dabo. And then obviously in this playoff, we had Ryan Day and Kirby Smart. And to your point, both of those coaches lost in this playoff. And I thought Kirby and Georgia got tighter as the game went on, as opposed to Trinidad Chambliss, who was just running around. I cannot get over some of his ability to make people miss. And then as he's running to the line of scrimmage, just heave the ball downfield, like blown coverages by Georgia, but just the inability to hold on to the coverage as long as they needed to. When the pass rush was trying to get home to Chambliss, he was able to turn around and just make it happen. You see the 13 straight completions, and I don't even know if that does justice to what was happening, because it was the depth of those targets. 13 straight completions in today's world can mean dump-offs left and right, and we saw a lot of that, for example, in the Oregon game. This was Chambliss just absolutely pushing the ball downfield, and the fact that the mistakes didn't stack. Like, again, multiple drops in the first half, multiple problems for Ole Miss in the first half. And as the game wore on, it felt like Ole Miss got more relaxed and more comfortable. Not the team that's been there before, not Georgia with Kirby Smart that should have the calming voice of, hey, guys, we've been through this a lot. I know how to get us through this. This is a wild turning of the page in college football right now that we've seen so many huge coaches and huge brands dismissed from this thing by other coaches that seem to just have a cavalier, I got this swagger about him. I mean, Golding has a swagger about him in the way he handles this thing on the sideline that I think is important for Ole Miss fans to see for the future of where the program's going.
And also, you bring up Trinidad Chambliss's 13 consecutive completions. A lot of those completions came when he was scrambling, not just a little rolling left or a little rolling right. Like he was going all the way back 20, 30 yards into the end zone, looping back around, finding a receiver for a first down. It was remarkable to watch. So as we see Ole Miss and Miami face off in the semifinal, I will say, and I'm sorry, Ole Miss fans don't hate me for this, I'm just like a little bit sad that we don't get Carson Beck versus Georgia for, the chance to go to the national championship. Just like a little bit sad that we don't get that storyline. But I think the storyline is going to be which quarterback just made himself more money in the NFL. Because I have never had the conversation nor heard any conversation about Trinidad Chambliss as an NFL quarterback. The conversation was always, will Trinidad Chambliss get his waiver? Is he coming back to Ole Miss? Is he going to transfer to LSU? After last night, I'm hearing NFL buzz surrounding Trinidad Chambliss. And now Carson Beck, a guy who previously got buzzed to be the number 1 overall pick, and then he, laid plenty of eggs, and then now everyone's kind of wondering, is he really a good starting quarterback in the NFL? I think that this will be a face-off in the second round in the Fiesta Bowl between two guys that are proving to NFL scouts and NFL general managers, I belong at the next level, and I can get paid at this next level.
Caroline, can I give you a hot take now that we have seen this much playoff college football? I do not care about the Cotton Bowl, the Sugar Bowl. I don't care about the Orange Bowl. I understand the sponsored elements. I worked at ESPN for years. Fun fact, when you work at ESPN, you can't even make fun of the names of these bowls because so much money is paid contractually. So I understand why the money is there. And everybody always says the money. Fine. If you want to have this game right here, you're looking at that. Happy New Year to everyone except the people on the Orange Bowl committee in Orange Blazers. That is 15 minutes before a playoff game. Nobody wanted to watch that game there. Think about what that moment is like if you're an Oregon fan. Are you going to fly to Miami knowing that the following week you're going to have to fly somewhere else, knowing that the following week you're then going to have to fly back to Florida, you hope for a national championship game? If they advance, you're going to fly somewhere else. If they don't advance, you didn't want to be there in the first place. There's not an incentive for people to fly all the way across the country to go there. If you need to have the Capital One Orange Bowl be the title of it, call it the Capital One Orange Bowl, but put it on a campus. For the love of God, when we're watching this college football playoff be so electric, the one thing we were missing and could have made an impact in some of these games, give me that same opportunity to watch these teams play on a college campus. Give me that same opportunity to watch in front of the diehard fans. There's a reason in no other sport do we take the quarterfinals and the semifinals and say, you know what? We'll just neutral site them because neutral sites are stale. So I understand that college football historians want to tell me how important the Rose Bowl is. I get it. The granddaddy of them all, fine. I hear you. If you need to make them the national championship and rotate them or have the Rose Bowl be the championship game every year, I don't care. Whatever you have to do to put the quarterfinals and the semifinals on site at campuses, we need it. They've got to figure out a way to do that. Make the sponsorship money tie in different ways. I understand the difficulty, but truly, for the betterment of the future of the college football playoff, these games on a campus absolutely have to happen. Caroline, do you have a hot take for me after the weekend of college football?
Yeah, I will. I hear your hot take and I will raise you. We all want to figure out the correct formula for winning a championship. And I think the formula right now, the belief is just throw a bunch of money at the transfer portal. And look, that can get you there. That got Texas Tech into the dance. That got Ohio State into the dance. But money can't buy you physicality. Because a big reason why Oregon is where they are right now is because of the money that they spent in the transfer portal. Miami, the same way, spent a ton of money in the transfer portal. But that can't buy you physicality and toughness at the lines of scrimmage. Because that was the winner of the weekend, in my opinion, playing tough and physical on the defensive line, protecting your quarterback and running the football. That is what won Miami a game against what I thought was the best team in the field in Ohio State. That's exactly what Oregon did in order to shut out one of the best and most explosive offenses in the country in Texas Tech. Texas Tech has been the poster child for NIL this entire season. And what did they do when it came time, when it was put up or shut up time and all eyes were on them, a trip to the college football playoff semifinal? They got outplayed and they got out-physicaled. So we all want to find this formula. But the reality is, it's a little bit of everything. You do need to spend money. The top 10 spenders in college football, several of them are represented in the CFP. But you also have to recruit out of high school. Malachi Toney from Miami was a difference maker. He's a freshman who Miami recruited out of high school. You also have to have good in-game coaching. Just tell Kirby Smart that. You have to be physical. There's just some things that are requirements and prerequisites for winning in college football that money can't buy.
Specifically, we'll get into Oregon later in the show. I think they may have had the smartest game plan we've seen in years on how to attack that Texas Tech team. Plenty of college football left to come. We will get back into it. But coming up next, we got a wild weekend in the NFL that's going to decide an MVP, and everybody's getting it wrong. We'll tell you about it next. One night flipped the MVP odds. BetMGM now lists Drake May as the clear favorite after Stafford's game last weekend. Now, we've talked a little bit about the fact that if that one game suddenly sent everything awry, it shows you how weird this year's MVP race seems to be. And it seems to be that it's between Drake May and Matt Stafford. So, Caroline, let's start there. Is there anything in your mind that you think Stafford can do that's going to change where he sits in this conversation?
I do a little bit, and I'm kind of hesitant to say that because I don't think MVP should be a recency bias award. I don't think it should be who had the best game in week 18. Because let's not, ignore the obvious that the Rams and Matthew Stafford himself have kind of been limping down the stretch a decent bit over the last couple of weeks. I mean, he laid a clunker against Atlanta, laid a clunker against Carolina. They fell to the Seahawks in a game that was not Stafford's best game in week 16. So look, this hasn't been the Rams' best brand of football down the stretch, but it also doesn't ignore the fact that Matthew Stafford has had one of the most efficient and explosive years this season and the most explosive and efficient years of his career. So I do think that if Matthew Stafford goes out there this weekend, throws for 4 touchdowns, no picks, 350 yards, we're all humans. That's going to be at the forefront of our minds. But I don't think that should be the case. I think that we need to allow ourselves to step back and look at 18 weeks and 17 games as a whole, rather than just, being victims of shiny ball syndrome in the final week of the season.
History not on Stafford's side. It should be noted no player has won the NFL MVP in the last 25 years that finished third or lower in his division. And that is where the Rams are going to finish. So that's just one of those weird historical nuggets as we try and figure it out. And, I honestly think part of this just comes back to the game and the opponent. Like, you're talking about Arizona at L.A. at 4:25 on Sunday afternoon. I feel like minds are already kind of what's going to happen against the Cardinals that will change anything. And I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play the whole game. I could see he plays a half and then all right, we've got a rhythm, everything's good, and then they sit him out the second half because they don't want to really risk anything. So if he has a great game, he's done by halftime. If it's a mid game, he's done by halftime. I'm not sure there's going to be enough sort of extra evidence on this. So what about Drake May then? If go ahead, Caroline.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you say there's not very much that you can do against the Cardinals, and I agree. I don't think anyone's going to be interested or watching that game. But also, with that being said, it was Drake May's game against the Jets that catapulted him to be the MVP favorite. And of course, that was Stafford, having a clunker against Atlanta that helped him out as well. But 19 of 21, 256 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks. Yes, that's one of the cleanest games that we've seen in a very long time. But it still came against the Jets. So I would want to apply that same logic to Stafford taking on a pretty bad Cardinals team that we did with Drake May against the Jets. Like, if Matthew Stafford has that kind of stat line against the Cardinals, those kinds of things should matter, just like Drake May's performance against the Jets mattered.
Well, Drake May gets the Dolphins this weekend, and that, again, this is a Dolphins team we don't necessarily think particularly highly of, but this is a Dolphins team that has been on a bit of a tear. This Dolphins team, I should say, has played better. I won't say a bit of a tear, that they play better. So in your mind, is there a shot that, Drake May struggles enough against the Dolphins that it reopens the door?
Sure. I do think there's an opportunity there. I think there's also an opportunity for Matthew Stafford to lay a clunker against the Cardinals, and then he loses a bunch of MVP votes there. So I don't think it will happen. I don't think either of these quarterbacks lay clunkers, to your point. I wouldn't be surprised to see Drake May benched after halftime as well. Just, hey, get some rest. Don't risk injury. Knock on wood. You did what you needed to do. We're up 3 scores at halftime. Enjoy, go sit on the bench. So I think that that's really the reality for both of these two guys. But when we're talking about Drake May, we're talking about Matthew Stafford, and I just got done saying that I don't think the MVP award should be an award of recency bias. But we haven't talked about Trevor Lawrence at all in the MVP discussion. We haven't really talked about Caleb Williams much in the MVP discussion. Is there a chance that if both of these two quarterbacks, let's say between Drake May and Matthew Stafford, lay clunkers, does that open the door for a name that we haven't been talking about much in the MVP discussion?
To me, it opens the door to the person that I would vote for if I had a vote, which is Christian McCaffrey. And frankly, we've talked about the 49ers. I think everybody just sort of forgot about Christian McCaffrey. This year, he's a little over 100 yards away from having a 1,000-yard rushing and a 1,000-yard receiving season right now. Like, if he goes off catching the ball on Sunday, he could get there. And that's crazy to me to think about what he's dealt with. Now also let's acknowledge the fact that they've been beat up all over the place. Let's acknowledge the fact that they played a large portion of the season with their backup quarterback. It didn't seem to even have that much of a drop-off. Why? Well, Kyle Shanahan's part of that, but another huge part of that is Christian McCaffrey. And for me, when I think of MVP, what I really ask myself is at the end of the year, when we turn around and we tell the story of the season. Last year, if you went to tell the story of the NFL season, you were sitting down with somebody that didn't watch a second of it. You couldn't have told the story without talking about Lamar and Josh Allen. What they did week in and week out was so huge that it absolutely defined the season. This year, that isn't the case for Drake May. I'd ask anybody, what's the defining thing? If we're putting together the rip of MVP for Drake May, of these incredible, oh my God, MVP plays and moments, where'd it come from? Stafford's had a couple of them, yeah, and that's fine. But if I want to tell the story of this season in a really weird NFL year, I don't think that either of those quarterbacks separates. Now, if I'm looking at it and saying, well, who adds the most value to their team? Who's the person that absolutely their team falls off a cliff if they're not around it? I don't know if that's the Patriots. They played a soft schedule, a Charmin soft schedule all year long. I don't know what the Patriots would look like with their backup quarterback. Matt Stafford certainly means a lot to the Rams, but I think without Christian McCaffrey, the 49ers, what the hell would they have? They've already lost everybody, and they put more and more and more on Christian McCaffrey to turn around and do it. I think if I'm telling the story at the end of the year of where greatness came from this season, while Stafford is a part of it, individual moments, all of these different things that separate, I think Christian McCaffrey actually separates in a way that deserves much more consideration for the award.
And to your point, this has been a year of inconsistency for the 49ers, not because of product on the field, because of who has been available. Brock Purdy wasn't largely available. The defense has suffered tons of injuries. Pass catchers have been a revolving door of who's healthy and who can get out there. The one constant in a year of inconsistency for San Francisco was Christian McCaffrey. And I want to know why we aren't talking about it more. Is it because all of us collectively as a football society kind of wrote Christian McCaffrey off as a guy who's always hurt, not always available, his best ability isn't availability. We just kind of wrote him off as that. Do we kind of write this 49ers team off because of how many injuries they had, so we weren't paying as much attention to the 49ers? I do think it's important to point out, though, if you want to bring up the Patriots schedule, and you are right in pointing that out, it is Charmin soft. So is the 49ers. I think the 49ers very famously have a very easy schedule. So I think that that's important to point out here, too. So is that a factor that the 49ers just haven't played in very many big-time marquee games outside of that matchup, the epic matchup against the Bears last week? Or is it the running back position? Are we all collectively as a football society so quarterback obsessed that we have our blinders on to any other position in the league?
I think it's so much of it is narratives. And like you mentioned, Christian McCaffrey can't stay healthy. We've all said it. We've all realized that narrative. And that was definitely the case in Carolina. He got to San Francisco in 2022, right? And in 2022, he played in that season. He played 17 games. 2023, he played 16. 2025, he's played 16. He has one season in San Francisco last year where he only played 4 games. But we continue to think, well, McCaffrey's injured. You can't really count on him. Also, we get so many shiny new toys that when we're in this world where you do have Bijan looking like Bijan and Jameer runs the way Jameer runs, and you see all of these guys with massive
Jonathan
explosives.
Taylor.
We turn around and we talk about those explosives. Well, Christian McCaffrey's just continually Christian McCaffrey. Again, 1,179 rushing yards right now and 890 receiving yards right now. So you're talking about somebody that's already accounted for more than 2,000 yards of offense. I just think it's a combination of it's a running back, which has been devalued. We haven't seen a running back be MVP in the NFL since Adrian Peterson did it, 15 years ago. It's a combination of there are more sexy new running backs that are fun to talk about. It's a combination of some narratives. It's also West Coast football. All of these things together create a very, very strange situation. What we know is we'll get more clarity in Week 18 on how it all plays forward. In the meantime, we'll get back to some clarity in college football. Let's figure out what to make of one of the most impressive wins of the weekend. Oregon absolutely taking it to Texas Tech. Spencer Mclaughlin joins the show. We'll figure out what he thought of the victory. What a game from Oregon's true freshman, Brandon Finney Jr. Just absolutely 2 picks, a fumble recovery, just a wild, wild statement for somebody. He is big man on campus. There is no doubt about that. We'll get some thoughts on that now from Spencer Mclaughlin, who joins us. You can listen to him on Locked On, where he covers Oregon. It makes sense of it for me because, frankly, it was such a massive defensive performance. Caroline yesterday was texting me as Oregon's defense, the most dominant unit in the country. The best defenses won all weekend. What did you make of Oregon's defensive performance?
Yeah, it was the best that I've ever seen from Oregon in a big game. Did you know it's the first time they've shut out a team in a bowl game since 1917 when they did it against Penn? I mean, you're not exaggerating things if you say it's the best Oregon big game defensive performance of all time, given the stakes, given the caliber of opponent. The line switched at the very last moment. I'm talking 10 minutes before kickoff, and Texas Tech was favored. Someone thought they knew something about this game, and they were very wrong. And look, I thought Oregon would win. I thought it would be closer than 23-0. It was in some respect, but it also wasn't because Oregon couldn't get out of its own way at times, and that led to the offense stumbling a bit in the red zone. But that Texas Tech defensive line is no joke, but the Oregon defensive line is also no joke. And it was Mateo Uiagalelei's strip sack that really changed things in this game and gave Oregon a short field for a one-play touchdown drive of 5 yards. I was really impressed. And for Dan Lanning, former defensive coordinator, he made a statement in this game with that side of the ball playing so well. And I think Cal fans are pretty happy going, hey, the guy that coordinated that's going to be our head coach. Thumbs up, guys.
I think everyone should be riding high on that performance, especially given the fact that Texas Tech has been putting up 480 yards and 40-plus points per game. You have that kind of defense performance, you have every reason to be kind of riding on cloud nine. But let's flip over to the offensive side of the ball. You've been watching Oregon all season long very, very closely and doing a great job covering it. What did you learn about Dante Moore yesterday?
Nothing that I didn't already know. It was another good performance. It was certainly far from perfect. I think he did an exceptional job, frankly, of protecting the ball. That Texas Tech defensive line was as advertised. Oregon could not run the ball. I believe this was their lowest rushing total of the season, just 68 yards as a team. And Dante Moore was the way they had to move the ball up and down the field. Sometimes that was with his legs, which he's, I think, just okay at, but a lot of times it was with his arm, and his numbers are not going to blow you away, but the way that he played was effective enough, and it still left a lot to be desired. I don't think Dante Moore played his best game when I went back and watched it the night after it happened because I was in a good mood personally, so I felt like watching it again, and I think he's got another gear to him. But against these high-level defenses, the Oregon offense has not shined or reached its potential so far. And I think that's going to be the biggest talking point going into the Indiana game is of the 3 phases of football, I don't have that many questions about Oregon's defense, which despite what some may think was not the problem when they played Indiana in the first go-around. Their special teams have been really good. They executed a fake punt, 50-yard field goal, did everything that they really needed to except for a late field goal, but the defense picked them up. And the offense just, it's done enough over the last several games against high-level defenses, but it has not been, I think, what it's fully capable of. If Oregon finds that next gear for Dante Moore in the Oregon offense, then this is a team that could go win its first national championship.
Hear me out, though, Spencer, because I was watching this game with all eyes on Dante because, frankly, I'm a Raiders fan. So I wanted to see Dante and Fernando. We want to see what these quarterbacks look like.
Stop it. No.
This is what we're doing. We're just watching.
No.
I don't think he's going to declare, but we're watching. So, but for me, what was really impressive is I felt like the game plan from the outset was about mitigating any loss. They were getting the ball out of his hands so quickly. They weren't allowing the defensive line to get to him. You mentioned the 64 yards rushing. To me, what's impressive about that is on 47 carries. They only got 1.4 yards a carry. It didn't matter. It felt to me like the entire game plan offensively was we're going to make sure that we don't put ourselves in a negative situation. We're going to make sure we don't put the defense in the wrong situation. We're going to manage the game, which takes tremendous patience. I thought it was a really patient, smart game plan because it was about mitigating disaster. Did you see it that way?
In some respects, yes. I think there was a component to this game, especially after Texas Tech tried to go tempo on their first drive and Oregon quickly forced a 3-and-out. I think Dan Lanning and the coaching staff seized on that opportunity to try and wear down the Texas Tech defense. Now, it's not as if they ever opened up the floodgates at any point, including the second half. But if you look at the pass rush specifically in the first quarter of this game compared to late in the third quarter, even late in the first half, it was really different. And the number of plays run in the first quarter and first half writ large was a huge advantage in favor of Oregon. And they had to rotate the defensive line a couple of times on the Texas Tech side of things. And they didn't have the exact same get off as they did when they were fully rested early in the game. So I think that Oregon was indeed smart about how they went about that aspect of it. And it was enough. I don't think they can play the way they did in this game, particularly running the football, and beat Indiana. The Hoosiers are too good of a football team, and they do too many things well for you to struggle on one side of the ball and, just kind of finding it. Like, just say it out loud. Can you find a way to win an ugly, sloppy game against Indiana? No, I really don't think that you can. They're in too good of a rhythm right now. I mean, they won off a bye in the playoff, which literally nobody else has done in the history of college football. Granted, there have only been 2 seasons, but everybody else is 0-7. Indiana won by 35. So I think what Oregon did in this game was be aggressive, which has been Dan Lanning's mindset for the last several years. I think he probably went forward on fourth down one too many times. He had 8 attempts overall. They converted 4 of them. I think between the Wildcat, the 4th and goal at the 2, or 4th and 2 just over the 50, I think one of those should have been a kick. Your defense was playing well on the 4th and 2 just over the 50. You could have made Texas Tech go the length of the field. You might have picked up some yardage in field position there. And then one of the other ones with a kicker who's been really reliable this year in Atticus Sappington, I think one of those probably should have been a 3-point take. Other than that, I didn't have a problem with him being as aggressive as they were, but I don't think they were trying to manage it. I think the way that Dan Lanning is wired, there was a video that came out of him just before the game with the team saying, hey, I can't repeat one of the words, but we're taking the ball. Like we're taking the ball, man. Like we're going to go out. That's the way that he messages to his team that he believes in them. So I didn't have a problem with that. And he admitted, I think, going into the half, I probably should have taken the points, kind of reminding himself like, yeah, okay, let's score points. There are not going to be that many in this game.
Okay, let's stick on the subject of nitpicking some tactical decisions from Dan Lanning yesterday.
Okay.
I know that social media can be a very vocal minority, but there was a lot of discourse on social media about Dan Lanning deciding to score in the last minute of the game. Oregon up 16, they're driving. They drive the score up 23-0. What would you say to people that Dan Lanning was classless for driving the score up in the final few seconds of the game?
Grow up. That's what I'd say to those people, not you. But I think that what Lanning's doing in that particular spot is just trying to carry any sort of positive momentum for his offense into the next game after a day in which they did not play to their standard. And most of that, not all, but most of it was that Texas Tech's defense is so unbelievably good. I mean, the defensive front, Lee Hunter, the defensive tackle, all Big 12 selection, was really under-discussed and underrated coming into this game. It was all about Romello Height and David Bailey, and David Bailey was the best defensive player on the field, and he shared the field with Jacob Rodriguez, but David Bailey was better on Thursday afternoon at the Orange Bowl, which is really saying something because Rodriguez played well. But I think he's just trying to find any sort of momentum to carry over into the next game, and I can assure you Dan Lanning's not worried about what anybody anywhere at any point in time thinks about a late touchdown. He actually did something similar last year at Michigan. Oregon was up 31-17 with less than a minute to go at the Big House. He called timeout to talk to his team about a moment he forecasted in their prep and motivation leading up to the game, which was eventually you're going to have a moment to look around the stadium and see everybody leaving. And at the end of that game, when it was mostly Texas Tech fans in the stadium, boy, there were a lot of empty seats at the Orange Bowl. And there were a few when the game kicked off because we've screwed up this playoff format so royally. But, I'm sure they'll get it right by 2034, guys. I think they're going to nail it at that point in time. But I think he was probably doing something like that. And as I said, I also think he wanted to just get his offense any sort of positive momentum that he could.
Way too early thoughts on Indiana, Oregon, the rematch. What does Oregon need to do for this one to go different?
You got to protect Dante Moore. You have to get him into a rhythm early in the game. His worst game of the season came against the Hoosiers earlier this year. 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown. Offense scored a touchdown in the first quarter, did not reach the end zone after that. And Bryant Haynes, the Indiana defensive coordinator, might be the best DC in all of college football schematically. I mean, what he's doing with Indiana's talent is just incredible. The number of times he's generating a free rusher as a quarterback is, I think, better than anybody else in the country. And he did that a lot against Oregon, and it didn't just lead to 6 sacks, which was a season high. And I think the most times Dante Moore's been sacked in a game, those UCLA teams in 2023 didn't have an offensive line blocking up front. But I think that what he did in that game was not just create those negative plays, but get in Dante Moore's head and cause him to not see the field very well. So Oregon's got to be able to settle Dante Moore down and get him into a rhythm like they did against Texas Tech. Even though he got sacked and it resulted in a long field goal on the first drive, Dante Moore was in a rhythm throwing the football, a couple of quick hitters and then a shot or two down the field. I think that has to be the first quarter game plan for Will Stein against this Indiana defense. If it starts to feel like the first matchup where Dante Moore is not able to identify where the blitzers are coming from, or he's not getting into the right progressions and he's struggling with those simulated pressures that Indiana runs so well, I think that's a problem, because while Oregon's defense is elite and just played its best game probably ever in the history of the program, you got the Heisman Trophy winner and 2 NFL receivers on the other side. It doesn't always matter how well you're schemed or how well your coverage is on the back end. Sometimes those guys can just make plays. So I fully anticipate it'll be an outstanding football game. But if Oregon doesn't do that, especially in the first quarter, I think it'll be pretty tough to beat the Hoosiers.
Now, I want to look at the college football playoff as a whole, because you also do a wonderful job of hosting Lockdown College Football. We'll have Indiana and Oregon and Miami and Ole Miss in the Final Four, just like we all expected.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, stunning surprises in the quarterfinal. What was your biggest takeaway from the quarterfinals?
Biggest takeaway? Well, the SEC isn't what it used to be. That's for sure. We're going to get rid of the buys. The long layoffs clearly have to go. And it's kind of fitting that the only team to have won after a bye is Indiana and Curt Cignetti. Like, the lore of this guy is absolutely outrageous. His aura is unbelievable. And he's been around college football for an hour and a half. I mean, 2 years ago at this time, nobody on a national level gave two you-know-whats about Indiana football. And now they are the best team in the country. That is the most incredible transformation I have ever seen. There have been a lot of discussions about what's going to happen with the playoff format. How many teams will it be? Much to my chagrin, it'll probably expand to 16 teams. And then that won't be enough. We'll go to 24. And I tell you, that 2034 tournament format of 68 teams in the playoffs is going to be unbelievable. We're going to have so much football to watch. It's incredible. And the winning team will have to play like 24 games in the regular season. It's going to be awesome. But I think what we saw is, once again, the teams that are coming off a bye that are supposedly getting a reward are struggling. And yes, Indiana proved it's not everything, but I'm sorry, Kirby Smart twice, Dan Lanning and number 1 Oregon once, Texas Tech's offense that was rolling. Yeah, best defense they played all year in Oregon, but 0 points. You can't tell me they didn't play at least a little bit of a factor. Ohio State, a long layoff after dominating most of the season. Like, I just don't see how, if they're going to debate a new format, they're going to stick with teams not playing for over 3 weeks. I mean, the conference championship games were December 7th, and then they're playing a game on January 1st. I don't know how that sustains, but you know what? I've been surprised at college football's ineptitude before, so maybe they won't. But I think that was a pretty clear takeaway. Like after 2 years, when bye team, the seeding was messed up for the 2024 playoff, and it's gotten better for this one. I don't think we're going to see those long layoffs anymore, because I think teams behind the scene, not publicly, because it's not a good look for a head coach, and I think it sends the wrong message to a team for him to come and gripe about it publicly when it's happened to his team. But we're going to sit here and pretend Kirby Smart can't coach, or are we going to look at it and go, okay, clearly having over 3 weeks off between your last game and your quarterfinal matchup is a disadvantage?
You are right. Expansion is inevitable as the fact that everybody will watch it and everybody will make money off of it. Listen to Locked On Ducks. Listen to Locked On College Football. All of those places. Follow them on social media. Spencer, really appreciate your time, man. Happy New Year. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for the insights.
Happy New Year. Great to see you both. Bye, Caroline.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
All right, coming up, we got beef drama in Dallas, and it continues. We'll tell you about the latest in their little spat. Y'all want me to feel bad? Jerry Jones slandered my name to Cowboys media and national media for months, so I do think I can react to comment if I want to. Hashtag respectfully. The beef goes on and on. It doesn't stop. We're in a new year. Same beef, Jerry v. Micah. It's 2026. We're still talking about it. I mean, look, has this become like the best rivalry in the NFL, Caroline? I feel like this is as real housewives as the NFL can possibly get.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that we're still talking about this. I wouldn't be surprised if we talk about Jerry v. Micah for several years to come. No, I don't think that this is the best rivalry because neither of these two entities are playing, right? Micah's hurt. The Cowboys are eliminated from postseason contention. If it came down to like Packers v. Cowboys for the final wildcard spot in the NFC, then sure, I would buy into that. But right now, I think the best rivalries in the NFL are going to be Ravens against the Steelers for the division and for a chance at the postseason. It's the NFC West. It's the Niners and the Rams and the Seahawks. So this isn't the best rivalry, but I will say I love that in today's sports, in today's NFL, that players feel empowered enough to speak up against bad ownership, against bad coaches, the fact that we get the NFLPA report cards and players can say, yeah, our locker room sucks, and I'm going to give it an F- because of that. Like, I do love that we now have players advocating for themselves like this, either, in press conferences or on social media, because it's just great content. Like anything that involves Jerry Jones or a player hating Jerry Jones is going to make headlines. And I'm just here for the content, Fitz. I'm here for the drama.
A 9-6-1 team has a player arguing with the owner of a 7-8-1 team. And by the way, that one tie is these two teams, right? Like, so I don't know. Like, there's this spot to me, and I say this to you all the time. Like, the conference, the SEC is better than the Big Ten, is the grown-up equivalent of my dad can beat up your dad. This, to me, is the ultimate two people arguing, and they're yelling at each other, and nobody's really going to do a damn thing about it. So, like, Jerry's going to say what Jerry wants, and he's a billionaire, and he's got a microphone in front of him, and everybody's going to say there's no recourse. And then Mike is going to go to social media. He's going to say what he wants. But at the end of the day, if you put the two of them in a room, what are they going to do? Slap fight? Like, there's no real outcome to this. The Cowboys and the Packers at this point are in totally different worlds. And the Cowboys aren't getting anywhere near the playoffs, and the Packers aren't getting anywhere. I should say Micah's not getting anywhere near the field for the Packers right now because of injury. So all of this would be sexy to me if we were going into the NFC Championship game and it was, player versus owner, and they let him walk and all of these things. But this is just a little teaser of what's going to happen for the next 5 years every time the Micah does anything and every time the Cowboys do anything. And I'm a little at this spot where it's like, hey, y'all, just both of you respectively move on with your life. Like, hey, Micah, I think this worked out the way you wanted it to, right? Like, you're in a place where you're happier, and you're in a place where everything's good, and you're in a place when you get paid and everybody loves you. All right, so you got what you wanted. And if you're Jerry, well, you decided that you had some sort of line in the sand you weren't willing to cross. You got rid of the player, and you got all of this equity in return that you've been telling us about. Now it's sort of, respectfully to both sides, I would say, why don't you keep the other side out of your mouth? Why are you talking about it anymore? This feels like your ex going in and snooping your Instagram stories. Like, stop. You're not getting back together, so just get the hell over it. Otherwise, you're wasting your glorious, blessed life worried about something that absolutely doesn't matter to me.
And this is par for the course for Jerry Jones. It doesn't make it right, and it doesn't make it okay that Jerry Jones acts like this, but he is who he is. He doesn't get a pass, but he will go on the radio and call out players or coaches. He will talk to the media whenever he gets an opportunity just to stir stuff up. Jerry Jones even admitted that he does that he will create stories to make sure that his Dallas Cowboys are in the headlines. That's what Jerry does. Micah is no better than Jerry Jones if he continues to keep the Cowboys and Jerry Jones's name in his mouth. I will say this about players. I will say this about coaches. I will say this about people, period. If you have something to say, type it out and delete it and don't send it, because all it does, all Micah Parsons is doing there, as I just got done saying, I want players to feel empowered to speak their minds, but that does make it a story. That does make whatever feud you have with the Cowboys and with Jerry Jones a story in January when it was a story in June. It'll only continue to be a story. So, and look, Jerry is going to make a story of anything as much as he possibly can, but Micah, be better. Don't be Jerry. Don't do what Jerry does if you're fed up with the way that you're.
There's a scene in The Hangover, near the end of The Hangover, where he turns around and he says, you know what, you're just a bad person all the way to your core. I'm not saying either of these men are bad people, but I think I love blunt honesty. I need somebody to just look at both of them and say, you're such a drama queen all the way to your core. At this point, Jerry, like, why? Why is Jerry engaging in anything that has anything to do with anybody other than the 53 men that are on the roster and the people that are currently under his employment? There's no win in it. And most billionaires figure that out at some point. There's just no win in talking about something that doesn't impact how you make your billions. And I'd say the same to Micah Parsons. Like, right now, there's still a chance for the Packers to have a very special season. Unfortunately, the drama that is surrounded seems to just be overtaking all of this. Now, that's not the only Packers news out there. Just to get everybody caught up, there is other Packers news, as we now know that Trayvon Diggs, former Cowboy, is joining the Packers. So the Packers-Cowboys drama continues. Remember, Diggs was cut by the Cowboys, then claimed by Green Bay. According to multiple reports, he might even step on the field as soon as this weekend. So we know that he has joined the Packers, has a chance to come in and make a difference. But also, Caroline, I would say this. Like, look, I get everybody says, oh, this could be a big old difference maker. Okay, the Cowboys just cut him. Like the Cowboys literally cut him and said, nope, we're good, because they knew they were going to cut him this offseason, because between the injuries and the weird concussion and the not being on the field, and is he right? Is he not right? Hasn't really, when he did play, it wasn't all that. Like, what are we talking about here? A guy that on a terrible defense, a guy that just got cut, has now been signed by the Packers. Maybe it makes a difference, but man, I wouldn't bank my season on it.
Yeah, this doesn't all of a sudden, this doesn't replace what you lost in Micah Parsons when he was injured. This doesn't all of a sudden change my perspective of the Packers so wildly enough to make a difference. And look, when you're coming off of a game where you gave up 40 plus points to the Baltimore Ravens, when you're on a 3-game losing skid like the Packers are, you can't just sit on your hands and do nothing. You need to at least make some defensive upgrades. And I think that's what the Packers are doing. Look, we're making a move. We're trying to fill holes. We're trying to address things that need to be addressed, but it doesn't change the game for me. This doesn't, like you said, there's a reason why the Cowboys thought, we're good on Trayvon Diggs moving forward. His availability is a question mark. And also, I have my own, personal football philosophy question marks about just what kind of a difference a defensive back can make. Just how big of a difference can a cornerback make? Is a cornerback going to be the difference between you getting bounced in the first round of the playoffs versus winning a Super Bowl? Maybe. I just don't personally believe so. So good on the Packers for identifying what a weakness was and going out there and getting a guy who can at least possibly address that weakness, but this doesn't drastically change things for me in the hierarchy of the NFC.
It is interesting. You trade for the player, you trade for the contract. So now the very contract that the Cowboys were looking to possibly cut their way out of, we'll see what the Packers do. Also, one other interesting nugget in Cowboys land, that Troy Aikman, now so many people just know Troy as a commentator, amazingly, but let's remember Troy Aikman, multi-Super Bowl winner with the Dallas Cowboys. The Dolphins have brought on Troy Aikman as a consultant to advise the organization on its GM search process. Not a permanent role. He's just coming in while they hire. So a lot of teams do this where they hire a search committee or they bring people in to help them identify a GM candidate. They're using Troy Aikman to do this. In Caroline, I'll caution everybody. John Elway never drafted a quarterback, right? Like Tom Brady is a minority owner in the Raiders who have had the worst season of my lifetime. Michael Jordan was not a good team owner in the NBA. Like as you go up and down the list, more often, Troy Aikman's going to help with the GM search. Like, so based on what? Troy is somebody that I've had the opportunity to break bread with and talk to, and I think the world is Troy Aikman. I think Troy Aikman knows more football than any of us, most of us ever will. Those are all true things. His ability to help identify a GM candidate, I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, look at Buster Posey with the San Francisco Giants. It's a really fun story, but is he a better GM than he is a baseball player? I don't know. So I think those questions that you have about Troy Aikman are fair. What does Troy Aikman know about GMing in the NFL? What does Troy Aikman know about identifying certain qualities or characteristics about a successful general manager in the NFL that nobody else in the Miami Dolphins organization might know? I do think, though, what was Troy Aikman for the Cowboys? He was the young savior of an organization who the Cowboys drafted and developed and eventually won a Super Bowl. That's, I'm sure, what the Dolphins are looking for. And finding their next general manager is finding and identifying that next young franchise quarterback that can get the Miami Dolphins to the promised land. Just because Troy Aikman was that does not necessarily mean that he can find someone that can identify the Dolphins version of Troy Aikman in today's football. But it is hilarious to me that Troy Aikman is not going to Dallas, where he played and won Super Bowls. He's going to Miami. So I hope Troy Aikman nothing but the best. I hope the Miami Dolphins find the guy and their guy to come in and turn their organization around. But it's so hilarious because I know, you and I both know, Fitz, the Cowboys would never do anything like this, would never do something like this. Even if Troy Aikman proves to be the smartest football GM front office brain that we have seen in this generation of football, Jerry Jones would never pick up the phone and call Troy Aikman and ask for his help. Never, ever, ever in a million years.
Yeah, which is such an interesting sideline on it. And a reminder, by the way, when the Dolphins are bringing outside voices that the Dolphins are still trying to figure all of this out. Plenty of chaos could come from Miami. All right, speaking of chaos, we'll get to some of it coming up next. We've got a wild weekend in the NFC South. So you're saying there's a chance. We'll break it down next. So you're telling me there's a chance, which is basically what all of us are feeling as we go into week 18 across the NFL landscape on Sunday. Mercifully, the NFC South will finally be won. Whether it's Tampa or Carolina remains to be seen. I will remind everybody that it's also not just as simple as Tampa or Carolina. Carolina wins, they got it. That's fine. But remember, even if the Buccaneers win, the Panthers could still win the division based on what the Falcons do. That is what a cluster, what the NFC South is. So here's the thing. One of these teams is going to make the playoffs. Can they actually get a playoff win, though? In your mind, Caroline Fenton, could the NFC South champion shock the world, get a home win? They will get a home game. Will they get a home win in the playoffs?
No. And I say that with love in my heart as somebody who lives in Charlotte,
actually
North
did.
Carolina.
That felt so nice the way you said that.
No,
You're like, oh,
no, you're not gonna do that. The NFC is way too stacked. Like, if you would ask me this question about the winner of the AFC South, I'd say sure, 100%, because the AFC is wide open. There is not one elite team. But the NFC is like Oprah. Like, you're an elite team. You're an elite team. You're an elite team. There are so many great and Super Bowl contending and Super Bowl caliber teams in the NFC. I don't view the Panthers as that. I don't view the Buccaneers as that. This is this game, or this division rather, as the somebody's got to win it bowl. Somebody's got to make the playoffs bowl. So I just don't really think that either of these two teams are great teams. And the way the Baker Mayfield is playing now, the way that the Panthers have been winning games, I don't think is a sustainable style of winning in the postseason. I think the other thing too is, yes, one of these two teams is going to get home field advantage in the playoffs. I don't know how overwhelming of an advantage Bank of America Stadium or Raymond James Stadium is. If you want to talk about Soldier Field in Chicago when you're playing in January, we can talk about a home field advantage. You want to talk about Lambeau in January, we can talk about a home field advantage. I don't think Charlotte or Tampa are two overwhelmingly menacing places to play in the postseason.
Yeah, and I mean, for context here, the winner of this game will be the 4 seed because they will have won their division. It will be a 4 seed and could have a losing record depending on which team wins it. Their reward for that would be hosting the 5 seed, which, as it plays out right now, will be either San Francisco likely or Seattle. So the two teams battling for the 1 seed, the loser of that game is going to end up taking on Carolina or Tampa Bay. And look, the free fall of Baker Mayfield and the free fall of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is something we're going to spend all offseason talking about. What's it mean? How do they fix it? How do you get it right? Is it a Baker problem? Is it a coaching problem? Is it a health problem? Is it as simple as just running it back? I mean, questions are going to have to be answered all offseason for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and those questions aren't going to be easy to answer, Caroline. But frankly, getting one of these teams in the playoffs, much like I've said consistently with the winner of the AFC North, it's just putting a Band-Aid on a massive wound. It's not actually going to long-term fix anything. The only caveat to that is that team. If the Carolina Panthers make the playoffs, this is so far ahead of schedule for where we thought Carolina would be. I'm not a big fan of saying wait till next year. I think Washington Commanders fans understand why. I'm not a big fan of saying this is a building block for the future because lots of teams make the playoffs for 1 year. But for Carolina, I think getting to the playoffs is such a great statement for where they could head as a franchise. I feel a hell of a lot better about Carolina saying, hey, at least we got here than I do about a team like Tampa Bay.
And that all comes from preseason expectations because we expected the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to be a Super Bowl caliber type of team. And I do think that kind of motivation, those kinds of expectations, that can add a whole lot more fuel to your fire and light the fire under your butt a little bit more. Whereas the Panthers are saying, hey, we're just happy to be here. We're just excited that we're even in the conversation that it's week 18 and we're playing meaningful football. But I would agree with you that winning this game and making the postseason means more to Carolina. Whereas coming into this season, it wasn't a question of Tampa Bay making the postseason. It was how far can Tampa Bay go in the postseason. So winning this game, I think, means more to Carolina, but I think that Tampa Bay is feeling significantly more pressure to win this one and win a game in the playoffs as well.
Let's go to the other side of, so you're telling me there's a chance, and that would be the sea of suck that we swim in so often. The Giants have a 20% chance at the number 1 overall pick, according to ESPN Analytics. They would need to lose to Dallas, okay? There's a lot that has to happen here. They'd need to lose to Dallas. My beloved Raiders would have to beat the Chiefs. There's also some other wild tiebreak. Like, this is actually wild. losses by Seattle, Cleveland, Atlanta, Chicago. Any combination of those could also impact this. It's a very strange scenario. Do you think there's a chance that we get total chaos and the Giants end up with the number 1 pick? Answer this very carefully, Caroline.
I'm so sorry, Fitz, because I know that your soul and your heart hurts as a Raiders fan. I do 100% think that could happen because the Giants need to lose to Dallas and the Raiders need to beat the Chiefs. The Chiefs just lost to the Titans a couple weeks ago. Now the Chiefs, this version of the Chiefs, they stink. They can 100%. They could 100% lose to the Raiders. So I do think there is a chance there. I'm sorry, Fitz. Your team is not even good at being bad.
Here's the thing. I don't ask the football gods for much. In fact, there have been very few times in the last 25 years I've sat down and prayed to the altar of the football gods for anything. If the Giants could just beat the Cowboys, that would take care of things. Again, losses by any combination of the 3, Seattle, Cleveland, Atlanta, or Chicago. If 3 of the 4 of those lose, secured for the Raiders no matter what. I really need all of these things to happen before the Raiders kick off on Sunday afternoon. I'm going to be in a glass case of emotion if we get into the last game against the Chiefs. Now, here's my one hope. Here's the one reason I don't think that the Raiders stand any chance in this game. You are right. This Chiefs team did just lose. This could be the last game for Travis Kelce. I hope it's not, honestly. I hope Kelce comes back. Mostly I don't want to listen to the broadcast tell us how many times, like they did last week, could be the last home game for Kelce. This could be the last game for Kelce. I don't see the Chiefs laying down and going out that way if it is the last game for Kelce. So hopefully there is no chance. I'm all in. Look, after yesterday, I'm all in. I'm completely bought in on Fernando Mendoza being the next quarterback for my beloved Raiders. So I just need this to happen. Oh, we do have, speaking of the Giants, we have some news that's out this morning. The Giants, according to an ESPN report this morning, will be interviewing Mike McCarthy and Antonio Pierce. Chris Shula also on this list, that according from Shefty, but according to Jordan Ronan. Caroline, you've mentioned Mike McCarthy a lot. I feel like Mike McCarthy, his name's going to come up on this job a lot of times.
He should. His name should come up in the Titans coaching search as well. I don't know why we're not talking more about Mike McCarthy being a potential home run hire for one of these teams searching for a coach with a young quarterback. Did we forget that Mike McCarthy won 12 games in back-to-back seasons in Dallas? Did we forget that Mike McCarthy is a very well-respected offensive mind? And I look at the New York Giants and what they need right now. I think their number 1 priority should be finding someone that can reel Jackson Dart in. You don't want to take his cape away from him. You never want to do that to Superman. You never want to dilute what makes Jackson Dart great, but what you do want to do is give him the tools to protect himself and give Jackson Dart a coach that he will respect and a coach that he will listen to. Mike McCarthy's been around for a long, long time. He's seen a lot of football. He's coached a lot of football. I think that he is someone that Jackson Dart would listen to, somebody that he would respect, and I think that he would be a great fit, somebody who is a veteran in this league. That is what the Giants need, some stability and a veteran presence. So I would love Mike McCarthy either with the Giants or with the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, as you mentioned, 12-5, 3 straight years with the Dallas Cowboys. You're talking about somebody that's had double-digit wins 11 times as a head coach. And I know this is where we say, yeah, but look at his quarterback. Look at fine. All of these things stack up to part of the reason you can be successful as a head coach. Frankly, let's remember that there was a time where the Eagles were very comfortable letting Andy Reid walk, and it worked out for everybody. Philly has obviously had multiple Super Bowls since then, and Kansas City, very happy they got their guy. Just because somebody has been fired doesn't mean all firings are the same. So to me, if you have a quarterback in place and you want that quarterback to have the opportunity to develop, I do believe Dak Prescott is a better quarterback because he spent time with Mike McCarthy, for example. So I think Mike McCarthy is a smart hire for anybody with a young quarterback that they feel is coachable and can play in Mike's system the right way. So, I think Mike McCarthy, especially this year, start looking around at the names, y'all. Like, I don't think the coaching names are nearly as impressive as most years. We've already identified who the Ben Johnson's going to be. This year, I'm not sure we have that. So in that spot, if I can get somebody that has won, if you can win in Dallas with all the distractions that exist there, you can win anywhere, right? So you've got somebody that has won a lot of games in Green Bay. He's won a lot of games in Dallas. He's been to Super Bowls. He has a resume that, frankly, a win-loss percentage all the way across the board that you kill for most candidates. So I think it's actually a job that would make a lot of sense, especially for the development of for Jackson Dart. So we'll see what that means. Obviously, it's very early in the hiring cycle, but they're at least starting to identify some of those names. In about 72 hours, we'll find out more about who does and doesn't have jobs across the landscape. The Jags pull a 2020, or I should say, so maybe the Giants, could they pull a 25 Jags, go from bad to great next season? Do you think that there's a chance of that? Speaking of Jacksonville, are you saying there's a chance? Can we give Jacksonville just a chance, give them a little love, that they win the Super Bowl this season? Jacksonville, the best team in the NFL?
To answer your first question, I think the Giants could pull a 2025 Jags. Malik Neighbors is going to come back healthy. You have Jackson Dart that's coming back for his second year. You have that defensive line that's nasty. Why not? Like, I was high on the Giants coming into this season, obviously before the injury struck. But your question about the Jags, I think that they can. Because I believe that the Jags can get to a Super Bowl. In this AFC, who are you going to say that's overwhelmingly better than the Jacksonville Jaguars, the way that they've been playing over the last month and some change? Trevor Lawrence has been playing at an elite level over the last 5, 6, 7 games. So in this AFC where no one has really emerged as an infallible, unbeatable team, why not the Jags? So if you can get to a Super Bowl, I have to say you can win one. Now, I do not believe, and I'm willing to say today on January 2nd, that the winner of the Super Bowl does not come out of the AFC, just because I don't really believe in any of the teams. I don't trust in any of these teams in the AFC, but if you can get there, you can win it. So, hell, why not? That is my theme and my overall takeaway from this NFL season is, hell, why not? Why not the Jags?
I hear you. I hate history. You know that. I think history is useless in sports. What happened in the past means nothing to the guys that are on the field right now. I acknowledge all of those things. It's just, when's the last time a franchise made their first ever Super Bowl appearance? AI, and I can't confirm this yet, but a quick AI look says the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2003 was the last time a franchise made their first ever Super Bowl appearance. It is so rare for a team that's never gotten there as a franchise to get there. So, yeah, I hear you. Why not Jacksonville? I guess, why not Houston? Why not any of these teams in the AFC? You're right. It is absolutely wide open. Why not Denver? But, man, it's so hard for me to just imagine that suddenly, boom, everything happens and we are in with the Jags in the Super Bowl. That would be a wild story. But, hey, we're in a world where Indiana might win the national championship in college football. All things, cats and loving dogs, everybody's happy. It's a weird, weird world. We'll get thoughts on everything from Ben Fawkes. It's time to get to Ben. Coming up, we'll see what Ben thinks of some of these lines out there, including what to make of the loser leaves town matchup this weekend. Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson will play in a win-or-go-home Week 18 matchup versus the Steelers. He has confirmed it. He talked to reporters on Thursday, and we're now going to break down that AFC North showdown. To do that, we bring in Yahoo Sports senior betting analyst Ben Fawkes joining the show. All right, Ben, so how much – I know I love it when you do this at the beginning of the season, like the difference in lines depending on quarterbacks and where they are, sort of the wins above replacement metric for the lines. How much of a difference does it make in this game having Lamar?
Yeah, it is an interesting one because I would have thought this line would shift a little more towards the Ravens, but it's really kind of held at -3.5. The Ravens as a 3.5-point favorite. I think a lot of factors going into that. Like before the season, it probably would have been Lamar, let's say a 5 or a 6-point difference. Now, Lamar hasn't played as well. Obviously, we've seen Snoop Huntley play well. And previously, that was against Cooper Rush, right? And some other quarterbacks that were the backup to Lamar. But also Lamar just hasn't been healthy. And so it's kind of a question of, okay, if you have an injured Lamar, who's obviously one of his superpowers is his mobility, you don't really have that for him against Snoop Huntley, who has looked really good in a couple games and when he's come in the middle of a game. So there isn't as big kind of that difference. It really has pretty much stayed at -3.5. Now, Lamar has said he's 100% playing. I could have missed it over the last couple of days. I don't know if the coaching staff has said he's 100% playing, but obviously when your star quarterback says, hey, I'm going to play, I think that's a tough case for Jim Harbaugh to all of a sudden say, actually, we're going to go with the backup who's a little healthier. But clearly that back contusion was serious enough that kept him out the previous week. He hasn't been himself, and we'll see. This season, I believe let's say in the red zone, he is last in passing DVOA and EPA per dropback. So it hasn't been very good in the red zone, which they're going to need against the Steelers. And for the Steelers, I think this line as well is reflective a bit of the lack of DK Metcalf. And just we saw that offense last week against, admittedly, a really good Browns defense. I was saying on Inside Coverage to Andrew Siciliano, he's lucky he gets to watch that Browns defense every week. The offense, maybe not as much, but that defense is awesome, and they completely shut down the Steelers. They're so reliant on DK Metcalf as that number one receiver. I believe he has around 850 yards receiving. Their number two receiver at Calvin Austin's around 300 yards. So they're really relying on DK Metcalf. They weren't able to run the ball in this matchup the last game as well, and that was with DK Metcalf, even though the Steelers won. So I think odds makers pricing all that in, but ultimately not as big a difference right now between Lamar Jackson, kind of a banged up Lamar Jackson, or a healthy Tyler Huntley. And so that's why we've seen this line still be at Ravens -3.5.
Ben, you might be the only person that I've heard use the word lucky and Cleveland Browns in the same sentence. But you are right.
Fair.
That defense is something special. I want to look ahead to some futures. And we just got done discussing our thoughts on the MVP race. We saw Matthew Stafford and the Rams lay an egg against the Atlanta Falcons on Monday Night Football. And then we saw Drake May have one of the most efficient performances that we've seen in a very long time. Granted, against the New York Jets, but it was still 5 touchdowns nonetheless. Now, Drake May is the favorite to win MVP. Do you think that's reflective of what we'll see happen at the NFL awards on Super Bowl week? Or is that odds shift maybe an overreaction to just 1 week of football?
So I think there's a couple things here. First, I think it's definitely an overreaction. We've just seen the odds shift so much in this market based off of basically one game or a half. It was the odds were moving a lot on Monday night based off of kind of Stafford and how he looked against the Falcons. And then it looked like they might come back. And then all of a sudden, obviously, they didn't come back and they lost the game. But it's important to remember these odds, right? In a awards market, they're not reflective of anything kind of on the field, right? And by that, I mean, if you have that game we just talked about, Ravens and Steelers, the sportsbooks have an algorithm, right, that says in the second quarter, based off of the score and these two teams' power ratings and the weather and all these other things, here's what the line should be if, let's say, the Ravens are up 7-0 or the Steelers are up 7-0. There are odds reflective of that. This is kind of a guesstimate, right, at best, because the actual people who are determining who wins MVP are human voters. And so we can say, okay, well, we see the stats for Drake May, we see the stats for Matthew Stafford, it looks like, Drake May's better in some categories. Stafford's better in some categories. You obviously have the narrative with Stafford. He's never won it versus Drake May. Maybe you get unfairly dinged, right, in a way because, okay, it's his second year and he's been amazing, but he'll have other opportunities as well. Like MVP is such a narrative-driven award as well. But I think the biggest thing to focus on is just we're not really sure exactly what those odds represent. They're more of a guess versus knowing, okay, we know on the field in this situation, this is what it should be. And so we saw that on Monday night, right, in real time when Stafford was throwing interceptions. And all of a sudden, I think Stafford was minus 210 coming into the game. He left the game plus 325. Drake May on the other side, he was the underdog at plus 165. He came out at minus 700 from that game, which seemed like an overreaction. There's been some buyback. It's come back a bit. Now Drake May is about minus 350, Stafford plus 250. And obviously, they're both playing not amazing teams in week 17. And I think that's been the biggest argument against Drake May, right, is just the schedule. You can only play who you're against. He looked unbelievable against the New York Jets. That was who was on their schedule. Now, he had 5 touchdowns. He had only a couple incompletions. He looked as good as you can look, and they took care of business against that team. But it is that question of, okay, has it been the schedule as well? And on Stafford's side, he has a lot more touchdowns. I think people would point out a lot of those are from 1 yard out, right? So as opposed to the running back getting that, he's gotten that. Ultimately, I think it's going to be very close to a toss-up, which is why I do think it's an overreaction to those odds. Based off of how you played it, you could have both these guys at plus money, right? So I think right now it's kind of just a wait and see, but I do think that was too much of an overreaction from one bad game from Stafford on Monday Night Football, which again, national audience, so everyone was watching that game too.
Yeah, for everybody that loves the MVP talk, I will tell you, go watch Inside Coverage, our great show here. Jory Epstein, our NFL writer, is an MVP voter, so she talks a lot about the process. It's good listen for everybody. All right, let's get to some Super Bowl odds then on Stafford, because the Rams going to be the 5th or the 6th seed in the playoffs, depending on how things play out, but they're tied with Seattle as the Super Bowl favorite, or the shortest odds. So I'm a little confused on what to do with the Rams here. So how are sportsbooks power rating the Rams?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's kind of the difference sometimes with the futures odds versus kind of how the team is necessarily viewed by odds makers, right? And so ultimately, if the Seahawks or the 49ers, which we'll talk about, whoever wins that game probably will have the best odds. And ultimately, it's because you don't have to play one more game, right? But the Rams have been, I'd say, at least for the second half of the season, possibly before, the number one power rated team by sportsbooks. Earlier in the season, you had the Bills, you had some other teams that were up there, but the Rams have kind of shown over the course of the season and beating some very good teams, right? We saw them in London destroy the Jaguars. Now, all of a sudden, that win looks a lot better. Like they probably should have beaten the Eagles. They had that terrible loss and then the blocked field goal at the end. So they've played really well. Obviously, every team has kind of some of its duds. They had that against the Falcons. But I think odds makers overall see this as the best team. And remember, they're also playing without Devontae Adams, right? So they will presumably have their whole team healthy for the postseason. We've seen that they are able to win on the road as well. And obviously in LA, somewhat of a diminished home field advantage, although obviously every team wants to play at home. So I think they're a team that still can go on the road and win. That's why those odds are reflective a bit, and knowing that the public probably is still going to bet them at plus 550, so they don't need to offer plus 700, plus 800. So it's a combination of all those factors. It's always important to remember, too, that the futures odds aren't necessarily 100%. They're kind of true odds to win. There's a lot of things in there, but ultimately it's reflective of the fact that odds makers see the Rams as the best team in the NFL.
You mentioned Seahawks Niners. Let's get into that game. Seahawks open as 1.5-point favorites on the road at San Francisco. I mean, for all the marbles, the number one seed in the NFC. What are some betting trends that you're seeing in this NFC West matchup?
Yeah, really excited to watch this game. Really excited for some Saturday night football. That's something we don't get that often. This was interesting. This actually opened at some books at a pick'em or even Niners -1. We've seen that flip with some early kind of respected Seahawks money. Now it's Seahawks -1.5. The public is on the 49ers right now at that short price. Again, always kind of, the public betting somewhat what they saw last, which was the 49ers with a really impressive victory, certainly on offense over the Chicago Bears on Sunday Night Football. There's been a good spot, though, for the Seahawks. If this line closes and the Seahawks are road favorite, they are 5-1 against the spread as a road favorite, with a lot of those games on the East Coast. So they traveled well to the East Coast. Obviously, this would be a West Coast game, not as far to travel, but they're comfortable kind of in that road favorite spot. The Seahawks have the best defense in the league, according to DVOA. But important to note as well, they're 29th against tight ends, which is significant because if George Kittle plays, and it looks like he's trending towards playing, obviously that's big for San Francisco's running game and passing attack, with Seattle kind of struggling there against tight ends. I think one important thing to point out as well with the Seahawks, as well as kind of Sam Darnold was playing earlier in the season, much like Baker Mayfield, potential MVP discussions, right? He was in there. He hasn't been good, especially over the last 7 games. He, starting with that 4 interception game against the Rams, which ultimately they lost, he has a QBR of 38.1, and for reference, 50 is basically average. That 38.1 is the same as Justin Fields had this season. So roughly 27th in the NFL. He has not been good the last kind of back half of the season. They've survived because of that defense, some timely turnovers. But even in that Carolina game last week, he didn't look particularly good. He wasn't necessarily the reason that they won that game. And for the 49ers, they basically haven't been able to get any pressure on anyone since obviously they had Mikael Williams out, Nick Bosa out, Fred Warner out. They are 29th in pass rush win rate. Sorry, that's tough to say. And last in pressure rate. So can they get pressure on Sam Darnold without blitzing? That's going to be a big question. Ultimately, really, really good game. I think I lean the Seahawks, but ultimately, you also have to see if Trent Williams is going to play. That's a massive, massive thing for the 49ers. I think if he doesn't play, it probably leans Seahawks, and vice versa if he does play. He's that important.
We need a new name for pass rush win rate. It's too difficult to say. You guys can read him on yahoosports.com/betting. Follow him on Twitter, X at BFawkes22. Ben, Happy New Year, brother. Thank you so much for the insight. We appreciate you hanging out with us. See you next week, bud.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Thank you, Ben.
Good stuff from Ben, as always. Now, coming up next, the rumor mill is already floating, and that man, according to some, might be a Brown. Good, bad, ugly? We'll tell you next. Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel could be a name to watch for the Browns head coaching position if both become available in the offseason. That per Jeremy Fowler at ESPN. And this raises an interest. Like, we're already trying to figure it out. Again, over the course of the weekend, we'll probably start to get many, many, many reports about which coaches are safe and which coaches are not. Right now, we don't know. We don't know whether Kevin Stefanski is going to be back with the Browns or not. So my question to you, Caroline, is would the Browns be better off with Mike than they would be with Kevin?
Let me just say, while I love football season, I do love rumor season. So I'm very much so looking forward to all of this. To answer your question, why would anyone think so? Look, no disrespect to Mike McDaniel, but Kevin Stefanski is a two-time coach of the year for a reason. Kevin Stefanski is one of the more well-respected head coaches in the NFL for a reason. I think that we all have become very obsessed with what we saw from the Miami Dolphins offense from several seasons ago, that Mike McDaniel couldn't unlock a next level in Tua so much.
She makes a fair point here because at the end of the day, her point is an important one with Mike McDaniel. Like, at some point, how differently do we view the Dolphins simply because they put 70 points up on the Broncos a couple of years ago? I know it was impressive. And
Much so
I understand the background that we all
love
from Mike
they
McDaniel.
owe him $60+ million.
But I think we've got Caroline stuck here. I will say this. While we work on some technical difficulties, and we'll get Caroline back in on the show, I'll say this. At the end of the day, Mike McDaniel has to answer the questions of why it hasn't been successful in Miami. And those are real questions that need to be answered by anybody that's looking to hire him, because the fact is, he got there and he got his quarterback. He was part of an administration that decided that re-signing Tua to big money was the smart thing to do. He's had tremendous weapons on the offensive side. If you look across the board and ask yourself, what's the fatal flaw of the Miami Dolphins? That's a question that Mike McDaniel is going to have to answer. If he gets fired in Miami, I don't think he's going to, by the way. I think McDaniel's going to be back. I think Stefanski's going to be back, frankly. But if he does get fired, he's going to have to answer to whoever looks at hiring him next, not only why it didn't work, but why it didn't work considering the weapons that they had and the fact that he was okay with an investment in a quarterback that turns out to look like it was a bad investment to make, Caroline.
Yeah, that's why I am skeptical. If Browns fans all of a sudden feel like Mike McDaniel is the guy to get them to the promised land and dig them out of the sea of suck, maybe they want to look at Miami. And I understand the Dolphins, found a little something toward the end of the season, went on that 4-game win streak. I understand that Quinn Ewers looks, to be much better than a 7th-round pick. But I don't think anyone's looking around at the Miami Dolphins and saying, you know what I want? That. The season that they just had. You know what I want to be? I want to be the Miami Dolphins. So I do understand that this is kind of a questionable off-season coaching search, that the coaching pool maybe feels a little bit uninspiring because there isn't that Ben Johnson, there isn't that Aaron Glenn, there isn't that, other than maybe Robert Saleh, there isn't that elite assistant coach that's going to take that next step into the head coaching ranks. I just don't think, if you're going to move on from Kevin Stefanski, that's fine. But is Mike McDaniel going to do more for you than Kevin Stefanski ever did? I can't believe that because I don't think that he's done that in Miami. I don't think that he's done what the Browns want to become for the Dolphins.
All right, so let's throw another name out there because former Browns quarterback Brian Hoyer, great dude, by the way, believes Brian Flores would be an ideal fit in Cleveland, saying the Browns need, quote, an alpha presence to lead the locker room. He said they need to find an alpha who's going to take the entire organization and make it his. Brian Flores is going to come and he's not going to take any you-know-what from anybody. Flores to Cleveland. Do you like that?
Look, I think I love Brian Flores, and I do think if he doesn't get a job this offseason, he will next. He's another one, in addition to Robert Saleh, that's that hot, sexy name, that coordinator name that's on the market. But I do think where Cleveland is right now, let's say if they run it back with Shedeur next year, I think that the Browns will want an offensive-minded head coach. If you look at the Browns, their issue isn't defense. That's actually been the one bright spot on this Browns team, in addition to some of the pop-off-the-page type of plays that we've seen from Shedeur down the stretch. But I think that if you're going to have a young quarterback, which is either Shedeur or the guy that the Browns eventually draft, if not this draft, then the draft after, you probably want a young offensive mind. I don't think that Brian Flores would be the perfect fit there in Cleveland.
I agree with you on the offensive mind portion of it, but even more importantly, I don't think Brian Flores should have any interest in the Browns job. I mean, if you're going to be a second-time head coach, I mean, look at what we saw from Ben Johnson. The first time everybody thought Ben Johnson was going to take a job, he flew around, he took all the meetings, and then he decided, you know what, I'm going to wait till I have a really good opportunity where I believe in the quarterback. And then all of the rumors came around about what they were going to do and where he was going to go last year. And what did he do? He went somewhere that he felt like he could win because they had a quarterback in place he really liked. If I'm Brian Flores, I realize that the chances I'm going to get a third shot as a head coach are non-existent. So I'm not going anywhere where I don't have a path to or a complete understanding of who my quarterback is. If I don't have a clear cut, this is the way we're going to get there, I'm not taking my second opportunity, hoping it works out with the Browns, who historically have never really worked out, not knowing exactly what the quarterback situation looks like moving forward, which leads us to Shedeur, because certainly the Browns take on the Bengals this week, and Joe Burrow was asked about Shedeur Sanders. His quote, he's certainly been under more of a microscope than any other fifth-round pick has ever been in the history of football, and every clip that I see seems to be handling it well. Do we believe that Shedeur is going to be the starting quarterback for the Browns in week 1 next year?
If I had to put my money on yes or no, I would say yes. Shedeur Sanders is their starting quarterback next year because the Browns have so many other positions of need. They need pass catchers. They need to bolster up the offensive line. They have positions of need defensively. At this point, instead of the Browns trying to race for a quarterback and trying to scramble and find their quarterback that they think might be the guy, why don't you just go ahead and address the best player available? Because when you look at this upcoming draft, you're going to have Caleb Downs, the best defensive player in all of college football. You have Jeremiah Love at the running back position, Arvell Reese from Ohio State. And I don't think that the Browns are in a position right now to swing for a quarterback. Now, with that being said, if the Browns believe that Fernando Mendoza will be the savior for their organization, Dante Moore will be the savior for their organization, then you have to do whatever it takes to take that guy. Screw whatever you have in that quarterback room. If you think that the savior and the guy for your organization moving forward is in this draft, you have to do whatever it takes to draft them. I just think the best thing, if I ran the Browns organization, I would run it back with Shedeur Sanders, and I would continue to supplement the quarterback position with other great players at different positions.
Yeah, I think the Browns have no choice but to do that. Because to your point, a few years ago, everybody said you have to find a way. If you believe in Caleb or Jaden or Drake, and I talked to so many people when we were prepping for our Yahoo draft shows that we were doing about that very thing. And teams called constantly. Teams offered a king's ransom to move up into the top 3, and every one of those teams said no. If you look at the draft right now, according to Tankathon, as we sit going into week 18 right now, the Browns would have the 6th pick in the draft. The Raiders have the 1st pick in the draft. I don't believe there's anything you can offer the Raiders that will get them off of a quarterback. The 3rd pick belongs to the New York Jets. I don't believe there's anything you can offer the Jets that will get them out of a quarterback. In fact, you would have to outbid the Jets, who have more ammunition they can use in the draft right now, to get to that number 2 spot. I just don't think it's going to happen. If Dante Moore comes out, we don't even know if he will. If Dante Moore comes out, there might be 2 quarterbacks with a true first-round grade this year. It's a weird year at quarterback. And then take a look at the 2026 free agent class at the quarterback position. Daniel Jones, who I think will end up a Colt again. After that, it's Russell Wilson, Marcus Mariota, Zach Wilson, Tyrod Taylor, Kenny Pickett. If you might be the one team that you might believe in Malik Willis. Maybe he's the one that is attainable. There's going to be a bidding war for Malik Willis this year because there are no other options out there. So I think the Browns are going to go into next summer and realize that just because of where they sit in the draft and because of what free agency looked like at the quarterback position, they have no choice but to have a quarterback competition between Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson. He's still going to be on the roster. He still counts a ton of money. That's going to be next summer is going to be which guy wins the starting quarterback job. And if the Browns can't figure it out, if it turns out to be a bad season, the good news is right now as we sit today, the next year's draft class looks like it's deeper and better at quarterback. Unfortunately, I would also remind Browns fans that's exactly what we were saying right now, a year ago right now, about this draft class. So it's a lose-lose situation. I think Shedeur is going to get the chance to start, but I don't think it's because Shedeur has done anything incredible. It's just where they are. Myles Garrett going to break the sack record week 18. He's got to get the sack record. This is the last chance. Do you think he can get it?
I do think that he can, right? It just feels like there's been too much build up to this. It feels like this carrot has been dangling in front of his face and all of our faces for the last several weeks. So yes, can he get it? 100%. We're talking about Myles Garrett here, who needs to get 1 sack. Yes, he can. But what I don't want to happen, Fitz, is that if he does, that all of a sudden we're saying, doesn't count. Because it happened in week 18, and week 18 is a new addition in the NFL over the last 5 years, and that record doesn't count. It's going to be so exhausting if we do that for every single record that gets broken in the NFL, and inevitably they will. We'll have to put an asterisk next to every receiver that breaks the single season receiving yard record. We're going to have to do that for every running back who breaks every rushing record from here on out. Look, it's a different NFL. I understand that, but let's just embrace greatness and historic and legendary greatness when we get it. That's what we're getting from Myles Garrett.
Yeah, 100%. And like the asterisk conversation is so worn out to me, just like it is
Exhausting.
every time we talk about the fact that Favre laid down for Strahan sack. I really don't care. What's going to be curious to me is the last few weeks, teams have been so worried about dumping it out. Quarterbacks don't want to be in the history books. I genuinely wonder if he's going to get it. And I think it's crazy. I do think he's right. Last week, it felt at times like the Steelers were more worried about not giving up that sack than they were about actually winning a football game. So my hope is that Myles Garrett gets it, because I want the history books to remember a great season. But I don't feel great about it going into that game, especially knowing that Burrow doesn't want to be that one. All right, we'll be back on Monday. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz. Enjoy a wild, chaotic weekend. Come back. See us Monday morning at 9 a.m. Thanks for watching Yahoo Sports Daily.